Okay, looks like we have a nice group of attendees with us. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Welcome to the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. We're going to do a presentation on getting involved with some of our volunteer opportunities. So we appreciate you all joining us and hope this webinar is informative and inspiring for all of you to join the foundation and some of the vital work that we're doing on behalf of the paralysis and spinal cord injury communities. So again, this is Get Involved, Volunteer and Advocacy Opportunities, the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. I am Chris Carson. I'm the Advocacy and Policy Coordinator. And I'd like to welcome you all with us. We'll be going over, pardon me, sorry about that. We're going to give you a little review we'll do some introductions and some welcomes, and then I will give you an overview of our Regional Champions Program, which is our legislative advocacy program. Talk a bit about who the folks are that we have in the program, why they've joined, how it works, and then we're honored to be joined by Felicia Gibson, who's in fact one of our regional champions, and she'll talk a little bit about her experience. And then my colleague Rebecca Soltzbaugh will talk about the Reeve Ambassadorship Program and who they are, what they do, a little bit about what that program entails and how you can get involved. And then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So I'll pass it over to Rebecca and let her introduce herself to you.
Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Rebecca Soltzbaugh, and I'm the program manager for the Reeve Foundation's Peer and Family Support Program. I have been with the Reeve Foundation for 14 years. And in addition to my role with the peer program, I also manage the ambassador program. And as Chris mentioned, we'll be discussing that with you all later in the webinar. And prior to joining the Peer and Family Support Program, I also held various roles within the Quality of Life Grants Program at the Reeve Foundation. And I also have a background in social work, and in particular, working with children and adolescents in the foster care system here in New Jersey. And with that, I will send it over to Chris.
Thank you, Rebecca. And as I mentioned, we have Felicia Gibson, who's one of our passionate regional champions, and one of our ambassadors is also here, and she'll talk about her experience working in both of those programs. And again, my name is Chris Carson, the Policy and Advocacy Coordinator here with Reeve. I've been with Reeve for just over a year. Previously, I was working here in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill in news media. So this has been a bit of a career transition, but really very pleased with the decision. It's so great to be with Reeve and working with such our passionate regional champions like Felicia in these important issues. So with that, we'll get started. Thank you all again for coming. So talking about the Regional Champions Program, what is it? Who are they? What do they do? The Regional Champions Program is our grassroots advocacy program, and we like to describe our regional champions as our legislative first responders, meaning when there are important issues coming through Congress, through Capitol Hill, these are the advocates that we have that are going to step up and take that time to send letters, to make phone calls in order to educate and alert these elected officials on those important issues. Regional champions are also the advocates who take the time to develop those relationships with elected officials and their staff, key staff in those offices. And it's really building the relationships with the staff that is the most important, because they have the most sway over these congressional offices. Regional champions also attend in-district events and town halls as coffees, again, going a long way towards building those relationships. They work with the Reeve Foundation, our communication staff, or other folks at the foundation to share their story via photo, videos, and blog posts or social media posts. And Reeve Regional Champions go out of their way to recruit others to join our advocacy efforts. They're not afraid to talk with their neighbors, their friends, their family about this program and the work that they do. So you might be thinking, well, that's really great. That sounds really interesting, but how do I know if I'm the right person for this program? And truth is that the regional champions are made up of a group of people who are interested in issues affecting the paralysis community for a variety of reasons. They may be individuals themselves who are living with paralysis. They may be a family member of someone with paralysis, or a friend or a neighbor or a colleague. And they've demonstrated engagement on these issues by either getting involved in other groups who are advocating for policies that benefit folks with paralysis, or other disability advocacy groups. Maybe they've signed up to be one of our online advocates and have already taken the time to send letters to Capitol Hill or to reach out to other elected staff, or they already have an existing relationship with an official, or more importantly, they're willing to take the time to build one. Where do the regional champions come from? Currently, our regional champions program, we have 43 regional champions that live in 38 congressional districts, and those are in states stretching from east in New Jersey to as far west as California. And our goal is really to try to build the program so that we have regional champions in each of the 435 congressional districts. So geography, doesn't matter where you come from. If you're interested in these issues, if you're interested in learning more about advocacy, learning more about how you can empower yourself as a citizen to engage with Capitol Hill around these specific issues, then this could be the right program for you. How does it work exactly? So this is an advocacy program, and we adhere to some very simple advocacy principles. The first one is, how do we build power? That's organizing and connecting people with shared goals and values together so that they can work together on these things. So organizing this regional champions program, bringing in people that are passionate about these issues that may not necessarily know where to begin, where they can talk with the foundation, they can talk with me as the advocacy coordinator, they can meet other regional champions like Felicia, learn more about different ways that they can get involved, and bringing all of those folks with this shared interest to the same table helps to organize that power so that we can take that next step, which is building influence, which is taking the information that you learn through the regional champions program, bringing it to these meetings with elected officials or their staffers, telling your personal story as a person who's impacted by paralysis, or the family member or the caregiver for someone who is, bringing that story to these elected officials, building trust and creating influence, which then leads to momentum. So using that experience, using that organized collective action to push for these things on Capitol Hill, building momentum with elected officials, so that when the time comes for them to make a key vote or to take an important stand on policy, they have been supplied with all of the right information from the people that know it, from lived experience, so that they can cast a vote with informed enough to cast a vote in the right direction. So I'll take a little bit of time and just explain a little bit about how this works. So how are some ways that we organize and connect people with shared goals and values? So with the Regional Champions program, we do that in a couple ways. We send out a weekly newsletter to our regional champions, giving them updates not only on what's the latest policy coming through Capitol Hill that will impact people living with paralysis or spinal cord injury, but also what's the latest information coming from the Christopher Dana Reeve Foundation, letting you know what type of webinars are being offered in other meetings and other events that are taking place that you can get involved in, so that you can be both educated on the latest issues in Capitol Hill and then meeting people who are concerned about these issues as well. And also attending monthly webinars that the Regional Champions program will host, where myself and my colleague Kim Beer will go through some of the latest information from Capitol Hill, and then also provide you with the type of documents, the type of the toolkit that you need, the information that you need to effectively communicate with elected officials. On building relationships and educating policymakers, that's a big part of what I do at the foundation as the advocacy coordinator, helping our regional champions to find the right people to contact in these offices so that they know when they're talking to someone from a congressional office that that person, works around health policy or some related field to the issue that's impacting our community. We've also helped get some of our regional champions installed in on committees that work and councils that will do research into these issues and perhaps report that to Congress. So helping you to make those connections so that you're meeting the right people, that you're armed with the right knowledge that you need so that you can make the most out of those meetings. Those are just a couple of ways in which the Regional Champions Program helps you to coalesce the power to create the influence and then to bring all of that with you into these meetings to keep the momentum high. You might be wondering, well, why me? Why would someone from Washington, D.C., an elected member of Congress, a member of the House of Representatives or the United States Senate want to hear from me? Well, the truth is that elected members of Congress, they're in D.C. for the entire year. They really rely on people communicating to them from their home district to really get a sense as to the issues that matter for the people that they serve. And they really do want to hear from their constituents. So if you're a constituent living in a member's district and you cared enough to take the time to set up the meeting, you cared enough about this issue to look over, the materials, to educate yourself on the issue and to communicate your story to them, that really has a huge impact on moving the needle as far as their support for a particular piece of legislation that might be coming to the floor of the House or the Senate. And they really rely on those stories to make the best decision and to ensure that they are in fact serving their constituents to the best of their ability. So they want to hear from you. They want to know what's going on, how these policies will impact people on the ground level. And they like to make people happy. As we say here, you're prepared to ask for something. You have a very simple, direct request for your member of Congress, and they'd be more than happy to listen to that from you and to consider your story when they're casting their vote. We also talk about the power of coalitions, and our Regional Champions Program and our advocacy efforts really do overlap with the work that we do with other disability groups here in Washington, D.C., when we're deciding on what our legislative priorities should be. So we work with the Consortium for Citizens with Disabilities, which is one of the largest disability advocacy groups in America. They really, working with coalitions is a great way to increase your brain power, to learn from people who've been focused on these policy issues for 10, 20, in some cases 30 years, and to know where we can direct our efforts, direct the attention of our regional champions when talking to these elected officials, and really build that momentum, build that knowledge base so that we're making the most out of the time that we get with congressional staffers. So we also work with a group called CPR, which is to protect rehabilitation, and another coalition group called the ITEM Coalition around issues with insurance and protecting rehab. They're an invaluable asset for us when we are communicating our policy positions to the Regional Champions Program. So I really try to do my best to be as transparent and as open with our regional champions about the kind of work that we're doing at the coalition level, so that you know that we're not essentially working in a vacuum. That when we offer our voice to a particular issue coming up in Capitol Hill, we are one of a large group of other advocacy groups that are sort of working in that same direction. It helps to deepen our expertise, increasing everyone's influence, and gets the attention from the policymakers. They know that if we're talking about something that, 5, 6 other groups are talking about, then their ears will perk up. They'll be more willing to listen to us. So working with coalitions is a really important part of what we do. So what exactly do we do? This is looking ahead. These are our top legislative priorities that have been the top priorities for this year and for the remainder of this year. So if you're interested in joining the Regional Champions program, these are a few of the main policy issues that we'll be working on together if you are to join the program. First is securing ongoing and stable funding for the Paralysis Resource Center. That's really the centerpiece of a lot of our advocacy efforts. The Paralysis Resource Center is funded through an act of Congress every year when they create the budget for the Department of Health and Human Services. So communicating with Capitol Hill about what the PRC does, the vital work that it does, how it actually impacts people's lived lives is a really important part of our advocacy efforts. So through really successful advocacy, which you might hear more about in a minute, we were able to secure an increase in funding for the Paralysis Resource Center to $10.185 million, which the House of Representatives passed on July 29th. So now that bill will move over to the Senate, and we're going to sort of shift our advocacy attention away from communicating with members of the House to talking with members of the Senate. So, if after this webinar you want to learn more about our program, you'll reach out to me and I'll get you up to speed as to where things stand with paralysis resource funding as it is now. We want to talk to Senate offices, and the ask is to include this level of funding, the same level that was passed by the House at the end of July, in the Senate bill, which will fund the Department of Health and Human Services. Our next priority, and this is one that we developed based on feedback that we've gotten from the community, is to advocate for the preservation, protection, and improvement of accessibility policies and statutes and of civil rights for those impacted by paralysis or mobility impairments and their family caregivers. So this is really an issue where we would be relying heavily on some of the coalitions that we work with and our coalition partners to find just where we can offer our voice and where we can best place our energies to have the most impact. So a big issue that we've picked up was to more recently, and we just did a webinar on this issue, and we just put out an action alert through the internet, sending letters to Congress about the Air Carriers Access Amendment Act, which in the Senate bill is S642, and the House is the House Bill HR 1696, and this would make air travel more accessible through a variety of mechanisms. And again, if you're interested in learning more about joining the Regional Champions program, we have a one-pager in our advocacy toolkit, which I would be more than happy to send to all of you so that you can read up on that issue. The third issue, advocate for policies to improve insurance coverage of treatments, devices, and rehabilitation for those impacted by paralysis or mobility impairments. I mentioned the ITEM Coalition a few minutes ago. They really are a leader on this particular issue, and we work with them. And this is another one that we've heard, over and over again from the community, is one that they care a lot about. Priority number 4, supporting federal investment in medical research, increased coordination with coalition partners advocating for funding at NIH, the National Institutes of Health, and the Department of Defense, and increased focus on spinal cord injury and paralysis resource at the federal level. So these 4 buckets, these 4 priorities should give you an idea as to when different provisions, different issues, different bills are coming up in Washington, D.C., we're really looking, my position as the policy and advocacy coordinator, looking at what issues are coming up, how they overlap with the main priorities of our community, and then what steps we can take and where we can sort of help direct the attention and the energy of our regional champions so that they can speak from their own lived experience directly to the members of Congress who serve them, if you live in their district, to get our position known to them, so that when it comes time for them to take a vote on one of these issues, they know what our position is and how the paralysis community will be impacted by it. So I know I just threw a lot of information at you. What can you do right now to get involved? You can sign up to become an online advocate, which I will drop the link to sign up to do that in our chat box. That's really simple. You just put in your email information, and then whenever we are doing a letter campaign to Capitol Hill, you will get an alert from us, letting you know what the issue is, a letter that you can edit to fit your personal experience or what you want to communicate around that issue to Capitol Hill, and then you can send it off with a click of a button. Let me know soon after this webinar if you want to be included on our weekly newsletter, and I can start sending you information updates coming from Capitol Hill and from the Reeve Foundation. Attend our monthly webinars, which we do every month. Those are those regional champion webinars where we're educating you on the issues, educating you on what next steps are, and what's going on here in Washington, D.C. Attend our social coffee hour, which is a new thing that we've started doing at the end of each month. We're trying to give our regional champions an opportunity to meet one another, talk more amongst themselves about what they're working on in their own local communities. So come along and join us there. I could send you our advocacy toolkit. You can study up on our priorities and study the materials on the issues that we're working on at this very moment, and then start working on reaching out to members, staffers, and members of the House and Senate. And I can help you do that, of course, so that you can start building those relationships and really get involved. So it sounds like a lot. It sounds like a really specialized kind of position, but we really, here at the foundation, myself and my colleague Kim Beer, we try to keep our regional champions as educated and as up to date on everything as possible. And the time commitment is not too extraordinary. Sending letters to Capitol Hill is as simple as a click of a button. And then it's just a matter of, you taking the time whenever it fits into your schedule to keep up communication with congressional staffers and, to let me know if you need anything, if you need anyone's contact information, if you need any more information on a particular issue, I am here to help. So with that, I will hand it over to one of our regional champions, Felicia Gibson. Felicia is one of our really stars of the program. We're so happy that she can be here, and she'll talk to you a little bit about what the experience has been like for her, and hopefully she can fill in with a little bit more living detail, some of the brief overview that I just gave you. So I'll hand it over to Felicia. Thank you, Felicia, for joining us.
Hi, thank you, Chris. Hello, everyone. My name is Felicia Gibson, and I'll just start off with a little bit of background on how I became interested in advocating for people living with paralysis and their friends and family members. In less than 2 weeks, we're actually going to be coming up on the 3rd anniversary of the incident that paralyzed my husband from the upper chest down. Our lives did change forever that day, but after all the dust settled, I started looking for support. So one of the places I found it was on Facebook, everybody's favorite social media group that has all sorts of people everywhere. So in January of 2020, a member of the group who happens to be a coordinator for Team Reeve happened to make a post. And so I reached out to her about wanting to make a difference in my city. And she referred me to the Reeve Foundation's advocacy and policy team. When I started out trying to make a difference, the main thing that I was actually working towards was parking issues, curb cuts, just basically trying to be able to get myself and my husband into buildings, because just being able to get in and out of the car, safely cross the street, or just avoid having to be carried by strangers into a building was a pretty big deal to us back then. Still it can be. So I wanted to know what I could do to try and get these things fixed. We had noticed a lot of issues with accessibility in these areas in our city. So my contact made an email, introduced me to the advocacy and policy team here at the Refoundation. And when I spoke with them, had a really nice long conversation over the phone. And they encouraged me to meet with my House of Representatives member for where I live. So she gave me the email to his contact, a template form to work off of, just to initiate that dialogue and set up a meeting with him. And I'm actually going to take a second to share the results of that. Make it bigger so it doesn't look faded. So yeah, so last year, before COVID started, we were able to have an in-person meeting, myself, my husband, and I, with a representative, Buddy Carter. And we were able to tell him our story. We were able to express a little bit of frustration, but also some constructive criticisms, hopefully some ideas to fix some things. And so when I went into that meeting, I said I had a phone call with the advocacy team. I got links for tax credits, a vlog from another traveler who was a wheelchair user that critiqued my town's accessibility, also a document of what my city has as an accessibility resource guide. And I also had like a one sheet about the Paralysis Resource Center that I was able to share with Congressman Carter. But I went into that meeting armed with all of those things because I was able to get them from the Refoundation. I was able to say, hey, these are the ideas I have. These are the things I want to talk about. Do you think this is a good idea? Do you think this is a good idea? I don't know how to back this up. That's how I was able to find out about the tax credits that I was able to share. So I can say, look, they'll help you get a ramp, or, hey, look, you can get some tax write-offs if you just make your building a little bit accessible. So the congressman was very impressed with that. I was able to meet a member of his staff who actually used to work with some people here in the city of Savannah. And through that meeting, I was able to be introduced to local leaders, set up meetings with parking services in my town, local city aldermen, my mayor even, and I'm now on the local disability board of my city and / county, and a member of a task force that is hopefully going to be making positive changes in my city. I do find being a regional champion to be very fulfilling. It gives me a chance to make my and my husband's voices heard. Chris and Kim are very, very good about letting champions know what's happening on a federal level, helping brainstorm ideas, basically supporting us with whatever issues are important to us. I mentioned in the beginning, my big issues were parking, curb cuts, getting into buildings. All those things are still very important and still need to be fixed. And that's actually one of the things I was working on with the task force that I'm a part of. But now my focus has started to change a little bit too. And it's fine if that changes. Through the Reeve Summit, I realized just how much medical care is not equal. So now looking more towards trying to find a voice and advocate for medical equity. But basically Kim and Chris are right there to help fight for anything that you are willing to fight for. Chris sends out his emails with calls to actions from time to time, and I get to choose how much time I want to devote to my outreach. It can take as much time or as little time as I have that week or that month. Some months life does get in the way. I don't get to do as much, but other times I spend hours on emails, phone calls, research. So it's just about what you can do. The monthly webinars are really informative, and they bring issues that I never thought about to life, and good in-depth look at policies and changes that are affecting the community and ultimately each and every one of our lives. And I must just say, I'm very proud to be a regional champion. It's allowed me to find my voice and it's empowered me to fight for a change to make life more inclusive and accessible for everyone. Thanks.
Okay, I will take it from here. And if Chris, if you wouldn't mind advancing the slides for me, that would be fantastic. I'd really appreciate that. And again, everyone, my name is Rebecca Saltzbaugh, and I'm the manager for the Ambassador Program. I'd like to start my portion of the presentation by talking about what our mission is within the Ambassador Program and how our ambassadors go about accomplishing this work. Our mission is to raise awareness of the Paralysis Resource Center's programs and materials, facilities, and organizations that serve the paralysis community in their local areas. This occurs across the country. And it really is a localized grassroots outreach effort to let people who work at these facilities and their patients know about the Paralysis Resource Center, what we have to offer, and how they can access our resources. And for those of you who may not be familiar with the Paralysis Resource Center, in just a moment, I will describe to you what it is and let you know a little bit about what we do. Once our ambassadors, so the other focus is for us to increase access to and use of the Paralysis Resource Center by staff, patients, and their families at these facilities and organizations in their area. And really what our mission boils down to is getting resources to people who need them. People who are living with paralysis, whether they're newly injured or have a new onset of paralysis, or they may be living with paralysis for years, as well as their family members. We want people to know that the Paralysis Resource Center is here to help them and how we can help. So how do our ambassadors go about doing this? They conduct outreach to facilities and organizations in their local area and develop relationships with the staff there. They educate staff on the programs and materials that are available through the Paralysis Resource Center. And they also maintain relationships with staff to ensure that they and their patients continue to access the Paralysis Resource Center. And at this point, as I mentioned, I just wanted to provide anyone who is not familiar with the Paralysis Resource Center, or PRC as we call it, just wanted to give a real brief history and let you know what we do here. The Refoundation Paralysis Resource Center opened its doors in 2002 to promote the health, independence, and well-being of individuals living with paralysis and their families by providing comprehensive resources, education, and referral services. It really is a place where people who are impacted by paralysis can turn to for both answers and support, just as well as comfort. And the Resource Center includes a number of programs, including a network of information specialists, a quality of life grants program that provides funding to nonprofit organizations across the country, a peer and family support program, as well as a program that provides assistance and information to members of the military and veterans. And finally, our Paralysis Resource Guide. And at this point, I'd just like to mention and emphasize that all of our materials and services are provided free of charge. Next slide, please. So who are the Paralysis Resource Center's ambassadors? As with the regional champions, they are people living with paralysis, as well as the family members of people living with paralysis. They have knowledge of and connections to facilities and organizations that serve the paralysis community in their area. And when we were developing this program 4 years ago, this was a real key element of it. We know that people who are living with paralysis know their local communities really well. They know which facilities people go to for medical care. They know advocacy groups in their areas. They know where the adaptive sports teams are located. And so that's something that we hope that our ambassadors can bring to the table, are those pre-existing connections and networks and knowledge of their community so that they can have, reach out to those people to make them aware of the Paralysis Resource Center. Our ambassadors also are comfortable and enjoy public speaking because they do hold a lot of meetings and make some presentations. And our ambassadors are located across the country. I'd like to, at this point in my presentation, focus on the ambassadors' impact thus far. The program began in 2017, and since that time, our ambassadors have held over 120 meetings and presentations. They have distributed 457 paralysis resource guides, and I'll talk a little bit later in my presentation about the different materials that we have available through the Paralysis Resource Center, including our resource guide. And they have also given out over 550 packets to hospitals, rehab centers, and other facilities. These packets contain different Paralysis Resource Center materials, our written materials. So this is really, as I mentioned before, we want to get information to the people who need it. And through distributing our written materials, it's really a great way to get information, to get materials first to staff at facilities, who then distribute it to their patients and the family members of those patients. So these are things that people, if they're leaving inpatient rehab and they're ready to go home, they've got some information to take with them that's going to help them make that transition that they can turn to when they need it. I also wanted to take a moment to discuss where our ambassadors have conducted their outreach. Most of our outreach is done at trauma centers, hospitals, and rehabilitation facilities. That is still the main focus and was the original focus of the program. But since we started the program 4 years ago, we've really expanded the scope of where our ambassadors conduct their outreach. So our ambassadors also meet with nonprofit organizations, staff at centers for independent living. They have done presentations to support groups. And some of our ambassadors have actually spoken to classes at colleges and universities. In particular, I think it's usually classes of occupational therapy and physical therapy students, making them aware of what the Paralysis Resource Center has to offer, so that when they start seeing patients after they graduate, they'll be able to direct those patients to the Paralysis Resource Center. And then within these organizations, our ambassadors meet with staff who provide care and services to people living with paralysis. So we're talking about nurses, doctors, again, OTs, PTs, social workers, spinal cord injury teams. When they meet with nonprofits and say a center for independent living, they might be meeting with the executive director or their director of programs and different levels of staff there. And the next slide, please. Thank you. So I want to sort of get into our process and how our ambassadors fulfill the mission of the program and do their outreach. And at a very high level, our ambassadors really have 3 goals. The first thing they want to do is engage with a facility, engage with staff at a facility or an organization. That's usually through an initial phone call or an email. They then want to set up meetings and presentations to educate the staff members at the facility about what we have to offer at the Resource Center. And finally, their last goal is to empower the staff at those facilities to continue to let patients know about the Resource Center and making sure that the staff and the patients continue to access and utilize our services and materials. So next, I'd like to talk about what our ambassadors talk about when they're conducting their outreach and meeting with staff at facilities and organizations. There are 3 main things that our ambassadors focus on discussing. 2 of them are listed here. I'm going to talk about our information specialist team and our peer and family support program in a moment. On the next slide, we will discuss the different written materials that we have available, the publications from the Paralysis Resource Center that, again, are it's a big focus for our ambassadors when they're discussing what we have to offer. Our information specialist team, again, this is something that our ambassadors talk about very frequently and in detail. Just to give you an idea of what they do, they answer paralysis-related questions. They provide customized support, information, and resources to people who are living with paralysis, their family members, and their caregivers, and the professionals who serve the paralysis community. So our ambassadors can talk, in detail about how the information specialist team, how to contact them, what the inquiry process looks like, the different conditions that cause paralysis that we serve. They're able to give out all that information when they meet with, say, a nurse at a hospital. or a social worker at a rehab center. And then our peer and family support program is a national peer-to-peer mentoring program that provides emotional support, guidance, and information, again, to people living with paralysis as well as their family members. We really picked these two programs within the Paralysis Resource Center to focus on, because we feel that when people are in trauma centers, hospitals, and inpatient and outpatient rehab, these are the resources they're going to need access to most. And our information specialist team also is is a gateway to the Paralysis Resource Center. So when someone calls them, this is their first step, but the information specialist team can also refer them to other parts of the Paralysis Resource Center that may be of assistance to callers as well. So that's another reason why we talk about these two programs in particular. Our ambassadors, though, also talk about other Paralysis Resource Center resources, such as our website and our military and veterans program. So as I mentioned, publications are again a big focus of our outreach. That is because these are tangible items that staff can distribute to patients, perhaps at discharge, that they can take home with them so that they have some sources of information and support. Just briefly, again, like to describe these so that anyone who isn't familiar with these publications will now have a little bit more information about them. Our Paralysis Resource Guide is a 400-page general guidebook for living a healthy, active, and independent life with paralysis. We also offer wallet cards that provide vital information about secondary conditions that impact people with paralysis. We have topical fact sheets that provide information and resources on a vast array of paralysis-related topics. And our state fact sheets contain information and resources for people living with paralysis in each and every state. And then finally, you can see here on the far side of the screen, we offer patient education booklets, about 14 of them right now. And we have them available for a variety of topics, including bladder and bowel management, transitioning home from rehab, employment for people with disabilities, and other topics. So again, these are really important resources that we like to make sure that the staff at the facilities that our ambassadors conduct outreach at, they have available to give to patients, to give to family members, and get them connected. These will also get them connected to the Reeve Foundation's Resource Center. So what does the ambassador role entail? What do our ambassadors do? This is sort of the nuts and bolts of their role. They attend a virtual ambassador training, which I'll go into a little bit more depth in the next slide. They develop and maintain relationships with staff at local facilities and organizations that serve people living with paralysis. They establish contact with those staff who provide care and services to patients or consumers or clients who are living with paralysis. They educate them on our programs and materials through meetings and presentations. They also distribute Paralysis Resource Center publications, like the ones you just saw on the previous slide. And they provide a brief monthly progress report to myself, the Ambassador Program Manager. We try to make that as simple and straightforward as possible, just so that that's a quick and easy thing to do every month to let me know who they met with and how many materials that they gave out. And finally, I wanted to mention the supports that we provide as the program provides, and how we help ambassadors to conduct outreach and meet with facilities and fulfill their role. So as I mentioned, we do offer a virtual training on the Paralysis Resource Center's programs and materials. We also cover how to conduct outreach. We give you some strategies and tips for doing that, so that if you haven't done outreach before, you've got a basis, you've got a place to start at. And this is a virtual training. It takes place by Zoom and is about 1.5 hours to 2 hours long. We also provide our ambassadors with a list of facilities to contact in their area. And if possible, we give them a contact person if we can find that information for them. Any and all materials that are needed for outreach, such as PowerPoints for meetings and presentations. We can also provide talking points for phone calls. We have ambassador business cards that we can send to people. And in addition, we can also provide you with an introductory letter that will help someone get their foot in the door in a facility. We also provide all of our Paralysis Resource Center materials. We try to make this a very easy process for our ambassadors. Ambassadors just have to let us know what they personally need, and we will send it out to them. And if the facility that they visited would like to order some of our materials, they simply have to fill out a form and we take it from there. So I don't want anyone to think that if you become an ambassador, you're going to be lugging around boxes of books, booklets and wallet cards. We will take care of that for you and get the facilities and our ambassadors whatever they need. We take care of shipping all of that out. And finally, I did want to note that we do have a Zoom account available for holding virtual meetings and presentations. Prior to COVID, most, if not all of our meetings and presentations were held in person. Obviously, once COVID hit, that was no longer possible. So we do have a Zoom account through the Refoundation that our ambassadors can access and use. We will also help you to schedule the meetings and provide any technical assistance that you need with using Zoom. And this account will be available for the foreseeable future. We didn't want anyone to not sign up to be an ambassador because they were fearful of doing in-person meetings. This is available for our ambassadors. It's been working really well. It's enabled them to continue to safely conduct outreach and not be in person. And with that, I will turn the presentation again over to Felicia. She is one of our ambassadors. She's been doing some really, really terrific work for us. And we're just really pleased to have her on board. And I think she's really made a difference in her area, getting out the word about the Paralysis Resource Center.
Okay. All right, thanks, Rebecca. So yeah, I got involved with the ambassador program because I had some success with meeting with my congressman from being regional champion, and I wanted to do more. So what happened was that I spoke with a person who is in charge of advocacy and said, hey, how do I get involved with the ambassador program? They referred me over to Rebecca. And I basically wanted to understand more about what it was and what it offered. So when I spoke to Rebecca over the phone, she explained it to me. But when I actually attended that virtual training, everything that she said really clicked. It's basically the chance to go face to face with people or screen to screen and become the local face and voice for the Paralysis Resource Center in your town. I was able to spread the word about resources that are available and help other people in my community get access to them. And the best part is I'm able to do this on my own schedule. I can sit down, spend like 30 minutes working on this one day. Another day I might spend an hour. There have been some months when I haven't been able to do anything, and I've sent Rebecca, hey, I'm sorry, life got a little bit messy, email. And she said, that's fine, just pick up when you can. And that's exactly what I do. Rebecca and Colleen are really great at providing all the tools that you need. There's a PowerPoint presentation that covers everything. They'll start you off with a list of places for you to reach out to until you feel comfortable thinking of places on your own. And then the reporting tools that they use are super simple and organized. They have mainly like Word documents that anybody can use. The resources list I have is on an Excel sheet. So the materials request form, all of it, it's really, really easy to use. It's easy for the people that you are meeting with to use, most importantly, because if they want to order materials, it's just as simple as going to that materials request form, checking off a box, putting in how many you want, and emailing it back in. If I do have or what I'll usually do is sit down at my computer, open up my Excel spreadsheet, my contact form, follow up with people I've already spoken to. So if they need anything else, have any other questions, if I do have any questions, they have any questions that I can't answer, I'll just shoot off a message to Rebecca or Colleen, and they usually will get back to me with a really quick response. Or if it's something that they don't usually handle, they'll get me to someone else in the organization that is appropriate for them to contact. Like say if someone's interested in like a grant, that's a different person. So then they'll get them in touch with them. After I think of new places to reach out to, I can enter them into my spreadsheet, call them, follow up with an email. There's a nice fact sheet that I have with the PRC information that I can send to them so that they can look it over, see what it's about until I hear back. Once they've reached back out to me, I request that virtual Zoom meeting and I'll have a packet sent to them. Usually I try to set the meetings up about 2 to 3 weeks after I've spoken with them. That way they have plenty of time to get the packets. And then a few days before, I'll send them the materials request form and then the Zoom link. Unfortunately, everything I've done so far has been virtual because of COVID. I'm looking forward to the day when things calm down and I can actually meet the people I've been talking to face to face. I was extremely nervous at first because I was going to be giving presentations to people, and I was still learning about it. But as time went on, I was more comfortable, more involved, and more familiar with the material, so it started to get a lot easier. The organizations that I speak to are extremely receptive. They often express gratitude about receiving the materials. They'll say they had no idea such a thing existed, or that, hey, they wanted to create like a binder or a wall in their office so that they'd have all this information, and this is the perfect way to get started. So when they request the written materials, the fact sheets, the guidebook, the booklets, it helps them get started. I've actually had people reach out to information specialists on behalf of their patients, and then other people say that they would be interested in getting a peer mentor, or actually through this, I actually ended up getting myself a peer mentor in an effort to really understand even better how things work and for my own benefit. I've spoken with equestrian centers, rehab hospitals, outpatient facilities, schools, and I'm contacting more places each month. I recently spoke with the disability coordinator of my old alma mater, and that happens to be where my husband's actually taking college classes right now towards a degree. So I get to look at it all through a new set of eyes, and it feels like I'm giving back not only to my old school, but to my community. So when I share these resources with others, it helps me feel a sense of accomplishment. So thank you for taking time to listen to my stories, and I hope you are interested in volunteering.
Thank you, Felicia. I mean, I'm struck after learning more about the ambassador program is a lot of the similarities between the two. So I know we have some folks here that they might be ambassadors, they might be regional champions, but if you're wondering, do I have the skills to do one or the other? It seems like there's a lot of overlap. And even if you are on the call and you're already working in our peer family support program, having that willingness to get in front of people, to tell your story, to just be honest and genuine, really seems to be kind of the connecting theme between the two programs. So definitely encourage everyone here who's interested to contact Rebecca and I, and let us know if you want to get involved, and we'd be more than happy to set you up. So thank you, Felicia, for sharing your stories. And again, if you're interested in learning more, I know we put our contact information in the chat box, but if you want to take a minute, you can grab it here from this screen. And I know we have a couple of questions in our Q&A box.
And Chris,
First
I just
one,
wanted,
yeah,
I'm
sorry,
sorry,
go ahead.
Chris, I just wanted to also mention that everyone who's attending today will receive sort of a post-webinar email with a link to a recording of today's webinar, and the contact information for Chris and myself will also be in that email as well. So if you didn't want to take it down today, you'll be getting that email and be able to contact us from there.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, that's a great reminder. I will also include the link to sign up to be an online advocate, which I mentioned earlier in the presentation. We'll be sure to include that in the follow-up email for all of you as well. So, well, before we get to the quote from Christopher Reeve, here we have a few questions. The first one is, can you explain the connection between DOD and medical research? Which I'm happy to field that question. It's a really good one. And it's one that not a lot of people know about, but oftentimes the money that gets appropriated from Congress to the Department of Defense is through a program of theirs called DARPA, which is really a leader in medical research here in the United States, where they will fund research into new technologies, maybe new implants around the cure of paralysis or other conditions, and other research that might be impacting our community. There's a lot of discussion going on in DC now, which those of you who were maybe paying attention to some of the new policy priorities of the new president, he's been talking a lot about a program called ARPA-H, which would be kind of a new version of the DARPA model of funding medical research. But instead of having it located in the Department of Defense, where it is now, you would move it over to the National Institutes of Health. And through the National Institutes of Health, Congress can fund research into cures for a variety of diseases, cancer, Alzheimer's. But they are also having discussions as to what an ARPA-H program might be able to do for the paralysis community or other disability communities. And actually, this is a really good question, because just recently, through some of our work with one of our coalitions, the House of Representatives has already set aside, they want to give $3 billion to prop up this ARPA-H program. So in the early steps, they put the word out to a coalition that we're a part of, that they wanted to meet with and talk about how ARPA-H might be able to be beneficial for Americans living with disabilities of all kinds. So this is a great example as to how, you know, our Regional Champions program, you know, how it sort of shares information. Through our work with our coalition, we were able to, you know, have an opportunity to speak to someone at this new government agency that they're hoping to prop up. I was able to put the word out to our regional champions, you know, with that very same question. And, you know, by sort of sharing information, staying up to date with the emails, you know, if you see me sending you a request for your take on a particular issue, we get it, we're able to share it with our coalitions, or maybe even able to share it with people who work for the administration or who work in Congress, so that they can take that information and take it into account when they're actually drafting these policy or trying to build these programs. So it's kind of a long explanation for how DoD and medical research are connected, but wanted to be sure to give you the full scope of that issue. So Congress will fund medical research through the Department of Defense is the quick answer. The second one, this one might be for you, Rebecca. Is there a template, guidance, or rubric for the monthly ambassador reports?
And yes, we have, it's pretty simple and straightforward. It's simply a spreadsheet where each ambassador on a monthly basis reports any activities. So if they have any meetings, presentations, phone calls, or emails, they just log those into that spreadsheet. You know, we basically just ask, you know, who they're reaching out to, you know, what type of contact was made. If they had a meeting or presentation, did they distribute any materials, and how many of each? And then also sort of what is the plan for follow-up or next steps? Again, we try to keep this really simple and straightforward, just to make it easy as possible for people to report, so it's not a hassle, it's not time consuming. And then if I need to follow up on anything, of course, I'll do that, you know, after I've received the report. And I also just wanted to take this moment to just thank my colleague, Colleen Marzella, who works on the ambassador program with me. I neglected to mention her earlier, but she is a big part of this program and is really active in it. So anyone who joins us as an ambassador will get to know Colleen as well as myself.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I think we had answered, we had a third question about the resources being shared in an email, which we will be sharing more links in our follow-up email to you. And then we just got one final question in. What can we do and or are doing to reach out to our Native American friends living with disabilities, their families and friends, Northern Midwest, Northern Rocky Mountain areas? And that's a really great question. And I know for our part with the Regional Champion program, as I mentioned, I mean, we want people from every area of the country to be a part of our Regional Champions program. The more diverse voices we can have in the program, speaking to members of Congress, the stronger it will be. And, you know, the truth is, in such a evenly divided government, we have a 50-50 Senate, we have a House of Representatives where the majority party can only spare 3 votes. When politics becomes tighter like that, when the margins become tighter, voices of advocates and the requests that members get from their constituents ends up holding a lot more weight when they're deciding on what to do when they're casting a vote. So with that in mind, our Regional Champions Program, part of why we're doing this webinar now, we are really looking to expand our numbers and to bring in a more diverse group of people. And diversity, what that means in all areas, racial, economic, gender, but in particular regional diversity. We want to get more people from rural communities, more people from areas that are further outside of urban city centers. So to the person who asked the question about our Native American friends, if you have inroads in those communities, please share this webinar with them, share the information that you get. We want more people in the program, and we're trying to reach as many different diverse groups as possible. And that's partly where we really depend on the people we have in the Regional Champions Program to spread that word through the grassroots, word of mouth, to get out into their local communities and let people know that this is an option if they want to feel empowered and to try to push the scales in Congress in one direction or another. Rebecca, do you have anything you want to add to that question?
No, I think you covered it. I think as far as outreach goes, we would, the ambassador program would work with our outreach associate, who is another member of the Paralysis Resource Center staff, and work with him to make inroads into the Native American community and helping people there who are living with disabilities.
This is one I know from my perspective and my position, so we're really looking forward to being able to travel and to meet folks safely again, just because so much of getting the information out about the Regional Champions Program, the explanation, meeting people face to face, and so much recruitment comes from just those chance meetings and being able to talk to people, looking eye to eye. So definitely looking forward to being able to meet folks face to face and to get back out into the community again, because of what it will mean for increasing the numbers of our champions program and just also, increasing the diverse pool of people that we can have getting involved. So let's see if we have any more questions remaining.
And Chris, I noticed a couple that came in through chat. Someone was asking if they could be both a regional champion and an ambassador. And the answer to that question was absolutely yes. We'd love to have you in both programs. And we actually do, as Felicia is one of the people who is in a part of both programs. We have other ambassadors who are also regional champions as well. And there was another question about upcoming trainings. I know for the ambassador program, we'll be holding a training in the next couple of months for new ambassadors.
Felicia, do you have anything you want to add to any of these questions?
Yeah, thanks. So what I noticed in the chat when you were asking about the Native friends as well, and someone also asked about African-American communities. As a regional champion, I'm not in that area, but I know what I would probably do is probably reach out to Chris and find out who my legislators are in that area to bring attention to it, set up a meeting about it, and see if there's someone in that community that I can set up a meeting with to facilitate some communication back and forth between the two. As far as the ambassador program goes, when I was on the Reeve Summit, I was in a panel with some other people who were African-Americans who had been victims of gun violence, which is what my husband's incident was. And I was looking at it from the caretaker perspective. But it was pointed out that a lot of African-Americans, and I'm sure the same thing goes with Native communities, don't know about these programs. And as an ambassador, I took the opportunity after that being brought to my attention. When I started talking to my alma mater is Savannah State University, which is a historically Black college. So I made a point of talking to their disability coordinator making sure she has access to all of this information, making sure she got her order in for printed materials. Hopefully going to be reaching out to other organizations that help people of color as well. So on that level, you yourself can spread that information and let them know what's out there. So that's all.
Thanks, Felicia. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that completely. I feel like part of what makes the Regional Champions program strong for us is that, you know, we're dealing with issues that really overlap with a lot of other concerns. So each of our regional champions, they're bringing their own personal experience, they're bringing the priorities of their community, of their region to the program, you know, able to talk with us, able to digest our materials, our policy concerns. And I try to make myself as available as I can possibly be to our regional champions if they need to bounce some ideas off of me, or if they're trying to get a better sense of who they might be able to talk to at their local level about another issue. You know, I really pride myself on being a resource to the program as a whole. So if you're interested in joining, you know, you join the program, you're meeting with staff, you're engaging with our materials, you're coming to our webinars, and then there's an issue that you notice in your community that we're not talking about that you want to bring to my attention or my colleague Kim Beer's attention. You think it's something that we should be focused on, then like we're here and available to have that conversation. So it's really, we're a pretty small advocacy program compared to some other organizations, and we try to be fluid and responsive to the needs of our members. So I think that's one of the big draws of our advocacy program over others, is that when you get involved, you know, you can really take advantage of a lively community of people and really, you know, make it your own in your own way. So hopefully we can hear from more people when this is over.
Okay. So if anyone would like more information, you can reach out to Chris or myself, and we'd be happy to, you know, schedule a time to talk with you or go back and forth by email if that's more convenient, to get you more information about next steps and answer any questions about our programs.
So with that, we'll leave you with some thoughts from Christopher Reeve himself, who of course was a great advocate. And thank you all for joining us this afternoon. This is a real pleasure to be able to share this information with all of you. And I hope to hear from a number of you soon, or you'll hear from us.
Yes, thank you again to everyone for joining us today and taking some time out of your day.